Ladies and gentlemen, this morning we are very happy to have Mike Cassidy, who's the President and CEO of the Georgia Research Alliance. And Mike, all of the members have bios, so I'll let you do the introductions and we'll get started.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much. Always appreciate you having us down and having an opportunity to visit with you. I wanted to just provide a little bit of background about our organization, the Georgia Research Alliance. Certainly the chairman knows our organization well. Representative Byrd is very, very familiar with what we do and has been a big supporter. But the Research Alliance has been around now for 2 decades, 20 years. And we really, over this time, have been Georgia's primary catalyst for recruiting top scientific talent, helping to launch companies right out of laboratory discoveries, and brokering research partnerships, many times between our universities and industry, that are the kinds of things that are necessary to help build a science-driven economy for our state. And the impact of our work has been deep and far-reaching. To date, with the help of the state, we've invested about $530 million, again over 20 years, but invested about $530 million in funding to generate high-yield research opportunities in the state. A program that we call Venture Lab, it's our nationally recognized research commercialization program, has helped to convert that research into new business enterprises. It's created over 150 companies over the past 10 years. Those companies today employ about 500 individuals, and those companies have generated about $400 million in outside capital investment. So those companies are serving as magnets to draw new investment into the state and to create jobs. And we certainly hope at some point among those smaller companies there's a Google or a Microsoft that'll be a very big employer for the state. As I say, your investment, coupled with the strong stewardship that our organization provides, has helped to attract a total of about $2.5 billion in federal and private funding into those research universities, again through our investment in talent that we'll hear from this morning, in programs to help research commercialization, and in building critically needed infrastructure on those campuses. All of that helps to draw new, generally federal funding into these laboratories. And if you do the math, it's about a 5-to-1 return for the state's investment in terms of the yield that that's had over the 20 years in helping to attract other funding into these universities. And just one other metric, over the 20 years, the enterprise that we work with, the 6 research universities that we work with, the size of their research portfolio has more than tripled in that 20 years. And so today, the universities in our state are top competitors in the country. In fact, as a state, we're ranked about 12th in academic performed research, most of that funded by the federal government. And just a quick point on that, the federal government is going to invest in basic research. We want to be more competitive in bringing those dollars into this state. When this organization went into business, our research universities that year did about $400 million of research business. This year they're going to do about $1.5 billion of research business, again, principally funded by the federal government. So those are taxpayer dollars. The federal government intends to make wise investments in basic science, and we want to leverage that by bringing more of that activity to our state, because that's the fuel that generates the ideas that later can be commercialized and we hope become job creators in our state, in a scientifically sophisticated state. Now, the recession that our country and our state is experiencing now has really heightened expectations for our universities and colleges to be very proactive partners, and in many cases leaders for innovation and economic development. The need for faster innovation and mounting scrutiny on all public expenditures have sparked considerable policy discussion focused on how universities serve as economic engines, whether it's through commercializing technology, entrepreneurship education, or attracting research funding. Today's discussion is designed to demonstrate to you, our principal investors, that our universities here in Georgia are fully committed to fostering economic growth in Georgia and to enhancing the quality of life for our citizens. My 2 panelists this morning will highlight how Georgia Tech's research and development expertise in membrane science and flexible films led to breakthrough manufacturing technologies for alginol, an industrial biotechnology company. The company's commercializing the use of hybrid algae to make ethanol and other high-value organic green chemicals directly from carbon dioxide, water, and sunlight. We'll hear first from Professor Bill Koros, immediately to my left. Bill's a Georgia Research Alliance eminent scholar at Georgia Tech, where he holds the Robert C. Goizetta Chair in Chemical Engineering. You've got background about Bill in your material, but I'd be remiss to not point out that he's published well over 300 articles in his field. He holds 14 patents in the area, and he's a member of the prestigious National Academy of Engineering, along with several other national scientific societies. Bill's been an exemplary eminent scholar in his 10 years in Georgia. He's worked with prominent Georgia-based companies, helping them on highly confidential competitiveness issues. He's even worked with Georgia growers of crops to explore ways to lengthen the life of fresh produce on the supermarket shelves. Bill's team at Georgia Tech has been instrumental in alginol's ability to make ethanol from algae by developing the key technologies needed to advance the company's product development. Now, following Bill, we'll hear from Dr. Ron Chance. Ron is Chief of Engineering and Executive Vice President of Alginol Biofuels. Ron's had a distinguished career in industry. In 1986, he joined Exxon as their Director of Polymers and Fluids, later serving as a division manager and as a distinguished scientific advisor in ExxonMobil's Corporate Strategic Research Laboratories. Ron retired from ExxonMobil in 2006 and joined Georgia Tech as a faculty member while continuing to serve as a distinguished scientific advisor emeritus at ExxonMobil. Ron joined Georgia Tech in large part because of his relationships with two of our GRA eminent scholars, obviously Dr. Koros, but also a gentleman named Jean-Luc Breda, who happened to be a postdoc in Ron's lab many years earlier. So in essence, our GRA Eminent Scholars program brought Ron to Georgia along with our other scholars. His affiliation with Georgia Tech led Alginol to hire him to lead the company's cutting-edge research operations, which are partially based at Georgia Tech Incubator, the ATDC, which I know you're all familiar with. So just a little bit of background about our two individuals. Bill's going to take some time to talk about the research capabilities at Tech and how that's been fueling the growth of this company. Ron will pick up and sort of talk about the movement of those ideas and technology into fueling the growth of his company. And then we would really invite some dialogue and questions from you all on any topic. So thank again for having us here, Mr. Chairman. Bill?
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman Amerson, and actually all of the committee for getting up at this early hour to come and hear some things that I think what you'll hopefully take away is there have been some very good investments made. I came to Georgia Tech because I was really impressed by actually the balance of focus of research and student-oriented education. And it's been a great move for me. I moved a very significant date. It was September 11th, 2001. So that's a very easy day to remember because there were a lot of things going on at that time, in some ways indirectly related to energy. The handout I've given you, I hope you'll all have access to it. Okay. This is intended not to be a lecture, but more the more interactive, the better. So what I've tried to do is sort of give you a high-level overview of what we do, and then anywhere along the way, please go ahead and interrupt if you'd like more information. In a sense, what we really do is aim at improving the efficiency that energy is used, how energy is used to do separations. And if you got up and made coffee in the morning with clean water, if you turned on the stove and used natural gas to cook your breakfast, or if you rode here in an automobile, in some way we kind of helped in that process. What we have focused a great deal of effort. We were here, I visited 2 years ago, and at that time we were beginning a large program related to improving the efficiency of natural gas purification, and that first slide or first handout shows The natural gas is a wonderful fuel, but it doesn't come out of the ground ready to use. It has contaminants in it, and what's happened lately is huge supplies of available natural gas are now becoming available, but they have to be purified for use, and the simplest way you can do that is to use a membrane. In fact, in all cases, if you can use a membrane, there's practically no simpler way to do it because it's really a molecular filter. Rather than filtering dust and dirt out, it's filtering one molecule from another. And this first picture shows that when you essentially drill a natural gas well, up comes methane, which is what you want, and along with it, a lot of contaminants, most significantly CO2. And CO2 is what's called an acid gas. With a little bit of water, it makes carbonic acid, and it'll eat up any pipeline if you're not careful. So it has to be removed, and the best place to remove it is at the wellhead, so you can re-inject it back down into the well and keep the pressure on the well high as well. So we had, before visiting with you, we had done work, but then over the last 2 years, we've expanded that footprint of that research and doing a lot of work in this area now. And we go around and talk at national meetings, interact with people, have visitors in, and in the course of this, some of our industrial friends noted that if it's good for natural gas, maybe it's good for other things too. And we began working with Dow Chemical on one of the most energy intensive processes that occurs inside large petrochemical refineries. And this is propane separation from propylene. You're familiar with propane as a very useful fuel, but propylene is an even more valuable component that gives rise to polypropylene. And the insides of cars, all kinds of utensils are made of polypropylene because it's got good properties. And inside of a refinery, what happens is a chemical cracking process occurs where you break down molecules, and what you end up with is a stream that has propylene and propane in it. And usually this has to be separated with a cryogenic column. That means super cold temperatures, and the way that's done is by refrigeration, which costs a lot of money to do. What we're working with Dow is to take the kind of technology that we develop for natural gas and put it inside the refinery to help now reduce the cost of doing that separation. And a good way to look at this is every molecule that you don't burn up is something you can make a useful product from. And so the idea is our goal, as we show there, is not to make a 10% reduction in the energy use, but a 10-fold reduction. And think of it this way. If you're driving a 10-mile-per-gallon car, we want to make it a 100-mile-per-gallon car. So it's 10 times more efficient. And membranes actually have the ability to do that kind of a world-changing improvement in efficiency. So we worked on this, and Ron, as Mike said, joined Georgia Tech in 2006, and Ron and I ran into each other at one of these technical meetings, and there was instant good chemistry there. He's a very good critic and always points out things that I haven't thought of. I had done that at the talk, and I said, if you're so smart, come help us. And he was attracted to join, and in the course of that, we launched a couple of projects together. But then he always, I think, and he'll hear it from him, had a vision to look at more efficient ways to basically make hydrocarbons or use sustainable fuels. And it doesn't get much better than taking sunlight and CO2, which is actually a pollutant, putting them together and making a raw material, ethanol, that can be, you can use it for fuel, but you can also use it as a raw material for chemical processing. And Dow Chemical is interested in taking that ethanol and turning it into ethylene to make polyethylene. So the one sticky wicket problem is that to do that, you have to get the CO2 in a pure enough form that it can be used. And so Ron challenged us, essentially, after moving to alginol, to help in that process. And I think he brings the perspective of a very smart industrial scientist that says, I'm just going to bet on whatever wins. And so he knew what we were doing in membranes, but he has a broader background than I do in separations, and knew that adsorption, the ability to essentially pull a molecule out of a gas stream with a molecular sponge, if you will, is also a very good technology. And because this CO2 separation from flue gas is such a new area, he said, let's bet on both of them. And so in his role at Alginol, he is supporting research at Georgia Tech on both of these. And what that ended up doing is pulling me into this new area of technology, which is absolutely fascinating. And I don't know if it's going to be as big as membranes, but it's broadened what we do. The third slide is a busy slide, and I'm not going to go through everything, but what I'd like you to get a sense of is just how complicated even a process like this is. This isn't nearly as complicated as a petrochemical refinery, but it is a biorefinery of sorts. But the beautiful part of it, it doesn't need oil from the Middle East to operate. It basically needs CO2 from a flute. And if you see a power plant, the two main things that are coming out of the stack of that power plant are nitrogen, which is good, and CO2, which many people feel is a serious problem for global warming. And Alginol's vision is, well, let's solve two problems at once. Let's avoid emitting CO2 and take that CO2 and use it for a beneficial purpose. And so the little process is based on taking CO2, sunlight, and water. And then the little green factory there, which is a cyanobacteria, or algae, has evolved to the point that it can produce a little bit of ethanol. Now, what Alginol has done is take that and tune that algae up so that it produces more than a little bit of ethanol. And the idea then is you take that, and as is shown in that picture, you make acres and acres of essentially tubes of polyethylene filled with a bioreactor fluid where the sunlight can come in, cause that transformation, and then the next step, which is also a separation problem, is to separate the ethanol from the water. And basically what you do from there is you can use it for a fuel, but you can use it for a raw material as well. So that's what Ron and I are now really pushing very hard as a technology development. So I'd like to sort of close with what I'm proud of, I have to say, is last year my group, we still are very much interested and focused on education, but now we've broadened this to include more and more graduate education. And we operated a $4.2 million non-state of Georgia funds. We received additional funds from the GRA. And my chair is supported by the Goizetta Foundation, which is Coca-Cola based, and I also do work with Coca-Cola. But what we receive is $4.2 million of non-state of Georgia funds, and that is mostly salaries because it's supporting a significant group of people to do research. Some of the students have graduated from there, gone to Solvay Polymers here in Alpharetta, and so we essentially are a little technology hub, not so little, but significant, all focused around this issue of energy efficiency and sustainable energy. So I think what's happened, even since the 2 years since I was here, the Georgia flag is kind of flying higher and higher in this area of basically providing sources for energy-constrained world, and that's only going to get to be a more and more important topic as things evolve. In my group, I have personally 25 graduate students. That's an army. But in addition, there are 5 other faculty besides myself that have a number of graduate students, and we collaborate in that area. There's 31 PhD students totally. We have a lab manager supported from external funds, 4 postdocs, and an administrative assistant. So it is essentially a small technology company, but, oh, by the way, we also do education. And we're in the process of now discussing, and I can't mention the company's name, but essentially the best thing you can do is obsolete your own technology. And that's the idea of this company, is to say they own about 30% of a large international market now, but there's always somebody after you. And so what they want to do is take some of our technology and come out with the next generation product that will obsolete what they have and make it even better. So that's kind of the story that I wanted to share with you. And I think unless there's questions, maybe we should hear from Ron.
It's just a very simple question for you. Looking at the diagram of the blue-green algae pond, I guess, from the beginning of the process to actually fuel-grade ethanol, right now, how long does it take to produce from start to finish?
That's one of the beautiful parts of this process. It's continuous.
It's continuous.
So I think the residence time is probably a month, but basically from the time things come in. Ron is much more of an expert. I will defer to my esteemed colleague on that.
It's sort of hard to describe a residence time exactly, because it is a continuous process. And in fact, every other algae company harvests the algae. The harvest the organism itself, basically grind it up and get all the chemicals out of it. And one reason that none of those companies have gone commercial is that process is very expensive. And it's really, and none of those companies are below like $5 or $6 a gallon for the fuel. What we do instead is we have an organism, it's a cyanobacteria, or blue-green algae, it's called as well, makes ethanol intracellular, in an intracellular process. So inside the cell, the ethanol is produced. It diffuses through the cell wall. It goes into the culture, meaning the saltwater medium that it's being grown in, and evaporates. There's a lot of interesting engineering and physics associated with that whole process that we understand very well with help of Bill and his colleagues. And so you don't kill the algae, you just harvest the ethanol. So the ethanol is continuously produced through the process. It's produced at a very low concentration, meaning that we have to do some fairly sophisticated engineering to get the ethanol up to fuel grade without expending too much energy in doing that. And Georgia Tech has helped us with that as well. So it's a continuous process. And overall, our target is to make 6,000 gallons per acre. And to give you a comparison,
That was my second question.
Right, corn is about 400 gallons per acre. And the only other thing I would mention in terms of the energy consumption is about 20% of the energy content of the ethanol is consumed in this whole process. And that's about the same as gasoline, actually. So we've gone through all of the unique thing about alginol is we've done all these things. We've done all the engineering. We know how the process needs to work. We've gone through life cycle analyses to know that what the carbon footprint is, what the energy consumption is, the sustainability of the process, what waste is going to be generated. really soup to nuts in terms of the engineering, and no other algae company has done that. And that's really what we've done in the past couple of years in building, the engineering enterprise at the company. But we had a lot of help from our friends. It's not just Algenol, but it's Georgia Tech, it's the National Renewable Energy Lab in Colorado that we also work with. It's Dow Chemical, obviously a very large chemical concern, and Linde Engineering in Germany, that is very, very sophisticated, one of the largest handler of CO2 in the world. So there's a long answer to your question. But
it's great you answered two of my questions. Just a comment. Again, going back to the picture, we see these huge ships coming in and to the refineries and then going through the process of processing that into fuel that we can use. I like this concept of kind of one shop does it all, and to the finished product. That's very appealing. And you made one statement about the cost right now for producing one unit, I guess, gallon.
right.
We're not that far away now as far as cost is concerned. So I think you've come a long way, and the reduction of maybe through the process would be great.
If all goes well, and this is by no means a slam dunk, because there's still biological issues I can get into if you want in terms of the challenges that are still around. But in terms of the engineering itself, and if we can beat our targets for the biology, then we'll be at $1.25 or something like that a gallon for ethanol. And if you look at where corn ethanol is today, just the cost of the corn is $2.50 a gallon.
I don't mean to dominate this, but I'm on a roll here. Are there any environmental issues that you have to deal with in producing this?
This is nearly a perfect technology from an environmental point of view. And we have all been working from the start with EPA and with the Florida, whatever the corresponding unit is in Florida. I don't handle that myself, to get all the permits. We just got we had a permit in West Palm Beach where our pilot facility was before we consolidated, and to grow the hybrid organisms outside, because I didn't mention, but there are cyanobacteria, many species of cyanobacteria that make ethanol naturally, but they make it in very small quantities. So what we do we have like 40 or 50 biologists that work on this process, and what they do is to enhance that ability so that when it takes energy from the sun, it's directed into making ethanol as opposed to making more organisms. So that's the kind of thing that we do biologically.
And I think one of the important points is, if you look at this slide, it shows that unlike corn, this happens on unproductive land, and it can use salt water, so we're not consuming fresh water. So it's, as Ron says, it's kind of a tremendously optimized way to go about this. There are significant technology challenges, but that's what Georgia Tech's all about, is to help in that.
Right, and the other challenge, of course, is to make all this, stop me if I'm going into too much detail, but is to make all this work together, because it is like a refinery, and the oil refineries were developed over the past century, so they're very complicated devices, but you didn't start from scratch and make a refinery, it evolved. And so we're trying to make something that's pretty complicated, work, and we're building a pilot in Florida with DOE support to do that. And the other partner that's joining us in that is Honeywell, which is the best in the world in terms of control systems. So that's the other challenge, engineering-wise.
We have a couple of other people would like to ask questions, but I'm going to keep them short because I want to hear your formal presentation before time runs out.
I don't have a formal
Oh,
presentation. No, I do have a few things I wanted to say, but if you'll let me do that now, then
Just a moment. Let's give Representative Byrd a chance to ask a question.
Yes, good morning. Thank you for your presentations. You were talking about the corn ethanol. Now I know about 4 years ago we had hearings, and it was all about the biofuels for pine trees. And with Georgia having 24 million acres of pine trees, someone came and testified that they can now do a pine forest in 40 months. How is that comparing with what you're doing now from the corn? We know that corn's expensive, so to do ethanol, and it's seasonal and all sorts of other things. Can you address that? And I'm not quite sure about the algae thing. Does it you take out what you need, it just continues to grow, it just continues to live?
I'll let you, if it's algae, it's heat.
Yeah, okay.
well, there were several questions there, but going to the algae question first, the intention in our process is that the algae stay alive and keep producing ethanol. Of course, it won't live forever. So there's a certain rate at which it dies, and a certain amount of the energy goes into replenishing those algae that have died. And that's approximately 5% of the energy goes into replenishing the ones that have died. So we have to deal with the waste on that issue, at that level. So the intention is that they stay alive forever, and we keep working on improving on that. The question about cellulosic ethanol, I'm not, an expert in that, but the cellulosic ethanol at the moment would cost more than corn ethanol, but because they still don't have the process down to the point, there's a lot of complicated issues with logistics, but mainly the main issue is the processing of the material to break down the cellulosic materials into something that you can deal with, ferment to get the ethanol, and deal with all the waste as well. Maybe Bill probably knows more about that.
Well, there is in fact, the Georgia Research Alliance has been very much into this topic with work at Georgia Tech and University of Georgia to try to develop essentially more harvestable forms of cellulose. Ron talked about that it took over a century to develop the highly evolved petroleum refineries that we're benefiting from now. Well, it took eons for nature to develop a tree that wouldn't fall apart, and now we're trying to undo that. So it's not going to just happen immediately, but I think it's definitely, there's progress being made. The question is how soon that will happen, whereas this technology looks like it's not necessarily right now ready, but it's much closer, I would say, to implementation. And also has the ability to deal with directly this issue of CO2. It's, instead of using it, considering it a waste, it's now a resource is the idea.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, Bill was very generous in his remarks about me, and that's the reason I like working with him. I'm actually his assistant.
I don't think so.
Anyway, I've had a wonderful time at Georgia Tech, and particularly in working with two of your GRA's eminent scholars that were mentioned earlier, Jean-Luc Breda and Bill. I at least mostly left Georgia Tech to go work for Alginol, mainly because of I had already established a number of connections and projects between Alginol and Georgia Tech before I left. The exciting thing about Alginol was that Bill and I were already working on CO2 capture and sequestration, which I'm sure you guys get exposed to a lot. And I guess over the years we've both become less enamored with the idea of pumping CO2 into the ground. It's such a wasteful process. A lot of energy goes into that, and to no purpose other than the potential climate issues. Being able to take that CO2 and do something with it and really accomplish the same purpose and also make a fuel and also contribute to energy independence and so forth, that was an exciting thing. And it was something that, as a scientist, is not very often you get to work on something that can have, that kind of impact. No matter how long a shot it was something that, I really wanted to do, and Bill was equally excited about it. So in any case, it all started with, I'm going to the last page, with Alginol, and in fact the CEO of Alginol contacting Georgia Tech with the mutual interest in CO2, and it was because of a paper that was published by Georgia Tech on CO2 capture by a colleague of ours, Chris Jones. And Chris and I worked together along with Bill on CO2 capture, and so he brought me into the picture. We started talking to them and established, through Georgia Tech Strategic Energy Institute, which I'm associate director of still, put together a program with Alginol and started working on various aspects of the Alginol process, and particularly around CO2 delivery. And what we had done what we did at the beginning when I first started working for Alginol was to set up a company called Cut CO2 Technologies that was a division of Alginol that's subsequently now been absorbed into Alginol, but that was sort of the start of everything. Alginol then was a very small company and did not have a lot of resources, and so GRA came in and gave us some seed money to buy some equipment to start up an embedded laboratory at Georgia Tech. So that's how we got everything up and running very quickly, and that was tremendously helpful. Just a few months, one of the first things that we decided to do was to do a life cycle. We're doing experiments, but the other thing was to do a life cycle analysis to look at what the carbon footprint of that process was, because it looked beautiful on paper, and actually see if you go through all the engineering, how much energy are you going to consume in doing this process, and how much CO2 is going to be emitted from all the things that you have to do to make it a real product, take it all the way to fuel grade ethanol. And so we started that immediately. In the meantime, the DOE sent out a request for proposals for algae and other biofuels, and one of the requirements was a life cycle analysis. So we already had that done, and it was just a beautiful fit into that whole process. And so Alginol and Georgia Tech, along with Dow Chemical, formed a partnership to go after money for a pilot facility, and we got $25 million. And so this whole sequence, GRA helping us get started, putting together this partnership with Georgia Tech, because I'm not sure we would have gotten the money without Georgia Tech as a partner. And so Georgia Tech gets a significant piece of that, $1 million or $2 million. I don't actually know what the total is. And they're today, still a very important partner. If you go back to the picture, Georgia Tech is involved in almost every piece of this operation in some form or another, with several different projects. We've talked about the CO2, but other aspects of this they're also involved in, including the whole picture in terms of looking at the carbon footprint for the whole system. That, in other words, the whole boundary that you see there, all the way from start to finish, CO2 to fuel. But they also work on the separation systems and so forth. So anyway, back to the end again. Recent things that have happened, Lee County in Florida gave us $10 million to consolidate all of our operations in Florida. if you guys had given us 10 million, we would have come here. So, but and so we've been in the process of doing that. We have grown to 120 employees, which I think puts us as the largest algae company around, and there are many algae companies. But we've finished the consolidation. We've moved our pilot facility will be built at the same site. So the site there in Florida has 40,000 square feet of lab space where we do fundamental biology, we do engineering and so forth. We have an aquaculture laboratory right there where we are transferring all that to actually growing the organisms. And you walk out the door and the pilot plant is going to be 17 acres of photobioreactors would be all on the same site. So it's all integrated. And so the current situation is we have a continuing strong and very productive program at Georgia Tech. The embedded lab remains here. We have an Alginol employee on the site along with 2 postdocs that Alginol funds. And so it's a very healthy, strong interaction. And that's
A question, Mike?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is extremely impressive. To me, this looks like the ideal reversal of the current burn biofuels, make carbon dioxide with oxygen. Now you're just turning it around with sunlight. I mean, you couldn't have designed a better thing. So a couple of questions. When are you, hopefully, your goal to have your pilot plant down in Florida up and running?
We'll build it out this year. So the ground is being graded as we speak. And we'll start laying down the photobioreactors during the summer and have inoculation with the algae in the fall. And so full speed be almost 2 years from now, but a year and 8 to 10 months, I guess.
Wow. Are you getting a lot of national attention for this? I mean, this seems like it should attract a tremendous amount of attention. Do you know what I'm saying?
We have a lot of attention, yes.
Yeah, great. Second question, follow up on, I'm curious about intellectual property with the GRA and Georgia Tech and patents and things of that nature. I presume there's a lot of patents and IP around this. Just very briefly, how does that work between your company and Georgia Tech and GRA and so forth? Just real briefly.
Give me to that.
Yeah.
Well, I actually negotiated the patent from the other side.
Yeah, you bought the patents.
So I have a foot in both sides here. But we have the standard arrangement that Georgia Tech makes with companies, which is when you do research, Georgia Tech and the company pays for that research. Mm-hmm. Then the company gets a paid-up, non-exclusive license to whatever technology comes out of it. And in addition to that, they get the right to negotiate an exclusive license to the patent.
Okay.
So we have 2 patents that have come out of the work with Georgia Tech and with Bill. Mm-hmm. The one we're in the process right now of negotiating the exclusive license on one of those. So we've elected, Alginol has elected to take an exclusive on that. But that's a standard arrangement that we make with everyone except ExxonMobil, who is a pain to deal with. So.
They have more lawyers than you do.
Right. Many more.
I'll just note
Yeah.
the Search Alliance does not get
Yeah.
in the middle of that. That's yes, sir.
Thank you very much for being with us this morning, and I'm very happy, Mike, to see that our seed money is leveraging considerable support from other institutions and other businesses. I thought that was real neat of you, in addition to starting the business or getting involved in the business, to at least leave 1 employee and 2 doctoral students at Georgia Tech. So, but how you handle 25, I don't know.
I don't sleep.
He's not lying about that. He's there all the time.
I would say that Alginol has hired 3 of my PhDs as well. So there's a constant, it's a very, very intense and very positive interaction.
We've actually hired 4 at Georgia. three from you and one other.
Can I make a couple of comments?
Go right ahead, Mike.
Sort of on that note, and Bill touched on this business of a multiplier, noting that he's one person, but he's got X number of postdocs and other associated faculty and technicians. Just a data point, if you think about the entire GRA enterprise, with your help, we've recruited 62, Bill Koros' 62 GRA eminent scholars. They oversee an enterprise of 1,600 associated faculty, postdocs, graduate students, technicians, scientists. So that's a big engine. And that engine generates each year about $200 million of research support. So it's a big company. I mean, that's the kind of company we'd love to attract into the state. And so this investment really is key to building that enterprise. Now, we're talking about a little bit of a disconnect. The real job creation that we're after, darn it, it's going to be down in Florida. And that's not what we want. And this is another example. We had a situation a few years ago. I think many of you are familiar with the company Suniva, which was a spin out from Georgia Tech around photovoltaics, solar cells. And much the same, it was based on very, very strong academic research at Tech. We stepped in with our Venture Lab program and helped to actually form a company that could commercialize that technology. They were resident in the incubator at Georgia Tech for some time. They were very, very quick to raise very significant outside venture capital from the Mid-Atlantic. And they went on a very rapid growth plan. They wanted to build a pilot plant. In their case, they were fortunate. Gwinnett County put up some funding to build a pilot plant up in Gwinnett, and that served them well for a little more than a year, and they were ready to move to production phase. They put out an RFP in the state of Michigan, pretty much just threw the whole enchilada at them and gave them a big, big incentive to do their production facility up in the state of Michigan. And so you may be aware that this year the budget for the Georgia Research Alliance is moving from higher education to the Department of Economic Development. And we're pretty keen about this because I think it's going to let us as a state get new alignment and really think about what are the industries that we do want to build in this state, what are the jobs that we want to create, and then if we can link the strategies of how we recruit and expand our larger companies and tie that back to the work all the way down in the laboratory and make that a little more seamless so that we're investing in areas that the state will invest in when they get to that big stage. Likewise, the areas that the state wants to invest in, for instance, aerospace and aviation. The Research Alliance has really never invested in research capability, but that's a major industry for our state. So we're going to start making new connections around the growth sectors for our state and where we're seeding research. So I wanted you to know that we're really excited about this new alignment, and I think making things more effective and seamless from the bench all the way out to building the factory. And the other thing I want to do, Mr. Chairman, I'm so sorry he left, I did want to recognize Representative Martin. Many states have tools like the Georgia Research Alliance, and we all are part of a national organization called the State Science and Technology Institute. And we have an annual meeting every year, and this last year I was asked to bring a legislator to that meeting to join a legislator from the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania where they could have a panel discussion about state policy with regard to science strategy. And we were able to get Representative Martin to go through all kinds of crazy logistics to get into Pittsburgh and spend a day and a half with us. And I appreciate that, and I appreciate all that you all have done for us. But Pennsylvania is the granddaddy of these state science and technology kinds of policy programs, and we're right up there with them now. And that's a lot of credit to your willingness to invest in this over 20 years, so we appreciate that.
Bill, I don't want to make you jealous, but I think we have fewer than 62 eminent representatives.
I have to say, I'm
You remember that one, don't you?
Yeah, the word eminent means a lot of things to a lot of different people. So,
thank you all for being here. I have one last duty, and that's for Dean. Would you please tell about the InVenture program from Georgia Tech and about it being on TV this?
Yes, sir. I'd be delighted to. I'll step up this way so I can. We'll make sure that everyone on the committee gets a copy of this, an electronic copy. But the InVenture program is a program. This is the third year that Georgia Tech has hosted this, It is created by our faculty for our undergraduate students to compete with some of the inventions that they have come up with for a prize, a cash prize. So next Wednesday night, March the 9th at 7 o'clock, Georgia Public Broadcasting, for the second year in a row, will broadcast it statewide. And it's a wonderful opportunity for the undergraduates to come together, some in sort of single competition, some in team competition, to showcase what they have come up with. And they have a panel of judges will sort of pick the winner, and it'll be on GPB. Invite all of you to come, anyone who would like to come. We have a VIP reception before the event. It's on our campus in the first theater where GPB comes to do the broadcast. Miles O'Brien, you may remember from CNN, is the host of the event. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to support the undergraduates. It's been said, it's sort of interesting that the undergraduates in particular are very risk averse. They have not been through some of the things all the rest of us have been through, so they have some ideas and they go out there and just create some fantastic things, and you'll be able to see that next Wednesday night.
What's the top prize?
The top prize, and it's listed in here, the top prize is $15,000 for the first place award, $10,000 for the second place award, and then there's $5,000 for the People's Choice Award. Now, where that is kind of like, it's been sort of referred to as American Idol for geeks, frankly. And so that's where folks from across the state, honestly, can call in, and sort of it's the People's Choice for maybe the one that didn't win the Judges Award. But also, probably worth me saying, that we at Georgia Tech help these students, the ones that win, we help them with the intellectual property piece. And so we help them to patent their idea, which is really the bigger part of this. The prize is one part, but that assistance on the intellectual property piece is probably even bigger. Last year, just very briefly share with you, the winner was a young man who created sort of an exercise wear, if you will. It's, a lot of you are familiar with the Under Armour type of product. Well, it's kind of similar to that, but it actually has some weighted gel sort of packs in areas, say, like of the biceps and your chest and so forth, if you wear the shirt. He's got other models as well. But where you basically exercise when you're just walking around, walking from your car to your office, wherever. And so he created this, and actually created it out of a tragedy, actually, as his own personal recovery from an incident. But nonetheless, that is off and running, and athletic associations are now, the orders are piling in. And so, again, he's just an undergraduate and kind of cranked this out of his dorm room.
How many people are wearing that under their clothes to look muscular?
Now, that is something actually that has been brought up, Chairman Battles. That is something that has been brought up in other discussions, yes. So it's an exciting thing, and it's a sort of, again, a salute to the undergraduates at Georgia Tech and in your university system. They're doing fantastic things. We'd love for all of you to come if you want to, but if you can't, turn on your TV that night and watch it. And I'm sure you make you proud, just like all of us are. And we'll get this to y'all on electronic copy.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? Thank you again for coming, and this meeting is adjourned.